So the Washington College Pre-Health Professions Program welcomes Dr. Jennifer Lincoln back for her second round in this awesome Zoom world. We're thankful she has joined us again tonight. She's a 2003 alum of the college. Dr. Lincoln's an OB hospitalist, a lactation consultant, and a medical writer in Portland, Oregon. You've likely seen her work on various media outlets, which everyone's been telling me about your TikTok. So I'm going to throw TikTok in first. But also, you know, if you're in my age range, Instagram, or maybe even, you know, Facebook. But you've likely seen.
Too old.
Nope. Okay. I think it must speed over. Oh yeah, no, I'm just old. That's
I don't
good.
know. Yeah, who knows? But it's all good, Libby. Don't worry. TikTok's there for you. Don't worry. It's there.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. But she's also been on the Today Show, Good Morning America, BuzzFeed, Parents.com, Bustle Pop Sugar, and many other fabulous media outlets. I actually saw something again from you last week, I think on Bustle or something on Instagram.
Yeah, there was something, yeah.
Yeah. I remember thinking, oh, interesting, and then it flew out. Dr. Lincoln graduated summa cum laude with a BS in biology from Washington College, and she attended Tulane University of Medicine and completed her residency in Oregon. She's a member of the board of directors for the Society of OBGYN Hospitalists and the Northwest Mother's Milk Bank. So this is her second lecture in our two-part series addressing what it's like to really be a doctor. So I'm sure we're in for good lessons and also probably some humor tonight. Thank you. I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Libby. No, and thank you guys too, again, for tuning in. I know it's late for you guys if you're on the East Coast, although you're probably all scattered everywhere. So it's just 4 o'clock where I am, about to be dark. And yeah, I hope that I've not overstayed my welcome now coming back for a second talk. Hopefully there's something I can tell you that we haven't discussed already. So last time we talked about what it was like, or what I wish I'd known as a pre-med. And then tonight we were going to talk about what medicine's really like. And I think that it's important if you are considering going into medicine to really try to understand as best as you can to know what you're getting into, because once you do, it's an amazing career. I love it. But I think it's really important to know what it is that you are potentially signing up for, because it's not easy. And it's one of those things that if you start down that road and then you decide you don't want to do it, it'd be a very expensive, very hard path to kind of change your direction at the last minute. And these are some things, I mean, I'm the first person in my family who went to college. I had no doctors in my family. So I kind of had an idea what I was getting into. I had good advice, but I didn't really know. I didn't have any direct contact. So I wish that I'd known some of these things when I was going and I was in your guys' shoes. But I thought maybe I just kind of give you the inside scoop. And then if you guys have questions along the way, feel free to ask them, or I will not talk the whole time because that's super boring. I'll finish up and then you can ask questions then. I'm going to start with the negative stuff because we should always end on a good note, but I think it's important to talk about the negatives because they're real. And this is specific to medicine. I can't speak to nursing or PA school or anything like that because every path is very different, but specifically for medicine. So I'm going to start with some of those. And I am going to be talking about suicide rates because it's a sad reality, and that's something that can be very triggering. And if that's something you need to step away from or whatever, I will let you know before we talk about it, and then you can come back in 5 minutes. But I think it's something that we should discuss. But we'll start a little lighter. So the first thing to know about when you are becoming a physician is that it's about delayed gratification. And I don't know about you, but now I feel like we live in a world where if it doesn't happen in 10 minutes, like we're like, oh my gosh, that's too long. So obviously you're graduating college, then you have 4 years of medical school, and then you have residency, which could be anywhere from 3 to like 10 years if you do neurosurgery. So while all of your friends are like getting married and having kids and moving up the career ladder, you're like still putting your books in your backpack and, you know, going to school. And so you give up your 20s. And I think it's important just to know that, and maybe even your 30s, depending whether or not you go directly into school. So that can be sometimes a little bit hard. You feel like you're, you know, losing the best years of your life. Although as I close in on 40, I feel like 40 is where it's at. So, and I know that makes me old, but you know, your 20s, you're working so hard, you're doing medical school, then you're working 80 hours a week in residency. It can be really hard to have that delayed gratification. But on the flip side, I will tell you the time passes anyway. So you're going to turn 30, you're going to turn 40. And would you have rather that you'd spent those years training for a job that you love, or you didn't do it because it just sounded too hard, and then you look back and you wish that you had? So just know that the time will pass anyway. And of course, when you're in it, it doesn't feel like it's going quickly, but it does. But really that delayed gratification can be really hard. You know, you miss holidays, you miss birthdays, you might decide to put off childbearing, and we'll get more into that. So, but just know that, you know, if it's worth it to you, then it's worth it. And with that delayed gratification comes delayed financial compensation. So when you're in medical school, you're just paying more money, right? You're just like, write the checks, and, you know, most people will do it on loans because, I mean, if you're lucky, if you've got, you know, people to go for it. But I mean, you know, you do loans and you're just looking at the debt and you're like, oh my God, is this going to be worth it? And it's hard in medical school to continue to live as a student, again, when your friends have like real jobs. And then as a resident, you do get paid, but you don't want to calculate the hourly rate because that will make you very sad. But it's a very low salary. The good news is that when you work at the hospital so much, you don't have to buy that much food because you can just get it from the hospital. But and we joke, you know, that, you know, it's not the greatest of salaries. I mean, it's enough to live, but truly you're also getting paid in education and the fact that you're allowed to do things like operate and take care of human lives. So it's just important to know that you're not going to be making as much money as if you were to go directly into a job, but you can still find ways to save, and you should. So thankfully I married somebody who's got more financial sense than I did. And we started saving in residency, doing Roth IRAs. And again, this is probably like not even in the forefront of your mind, but just know there is a way to save money to set yourself up for the future. And even though you're not making a ton, you should think about it, and you just live within your means. You know, you don't need the new car and you don't need all the fancy stuff. But just know that, yes, you're going to be delaying your financial gratification. But when we turn into the positives, which is the more fun part of this talk, the bottom line is that there will always be a job. So you'll always be able to pay back those loans and eventually make money, but just in the beginning, and you just kind of have to be patient for it. So to just know about that. The third thing that's really hard about medicine, I think, is the business of medicine. So I do not enjoy business. I do not enjoy thinking about how much I get reimbursed per patient. I don't care about charting, and how much I chart, how much I write down will determine how much insurance will reimburse me. And if I leave out one body system, like I forget to document one little thing, that'll drop it down to a lower charge. And I hate that stuff. And so for me, I selected to become employed by a hospital because I get paid a salary, the same salary, no matter what. If I was going into private practice, though, I'd be the worst possible private practice physician because I don't care about that stuff. I would not get reimbursed, and I would not be able to keep my doors open. So, you know, the business side of medicine is not why I went into medicine. I went into medicine to operate and to take care of people and to, you know, do that kind of thing. The other part of it is lawsuits. So I chose like the worst field when it comes to lawsuits, OBGYN. It's not a matter of if I will get sued, it's just a matter of when. And that's just a function of how we work as a society and how we've set up malpractice. You could let that paralyze you, and you could let that break you, and you could let that say, you know what, I'm not even going to go into medicine because that's too stressful. Or I love OBGYN, but I'm too afraid of the malpractice, so I'm going to do internal medicine or something else, just because statistically, you know, there are fields where you're less likely to be sued. And that's fine if you're really risk averse, but I think that at the end of the day, you've got to pick, you know, what are you going to be excited about going to work every day? And again, I am employed by a hospital. That was also a strategic move. They cover my insurance. And when it came to my last job where I worked at a different hospital, I was sure that when I signed that contract that they also paid tail insurance, which is just what it sounds like. They cover your tail. So as an OBGYN, I could be sued up until 18 years if there's an outcome on a baby. And that hospital will cover all of any lawsuits from that time. So it's not like I had to purchase my own tail, which sometimes can be the reason that you can't leave a job because financially you just couldn't even do it. So I filed this away. Do not let this, you know, stress you out now, but just know that when it comes to the world of contracts and jobs and thinking about your field, of course, you're going to want to involve a lawyer who's reviewing all of that stuff, but just know that that's not stuff that when I go to work every day that I worry about. Is somebody going to sue me? Because I know that if I provide good care, if I follow the standards of care, if I'm up to date, if I communicate well, and if something goes wrong and I say sorry, I am much less likely to be sued. And if I do get sued, I get sued. And the vast majority of lawsuits are dismissed or are settled because the hospital doesn't want to deal with it. It's not because you did anything wrong. About 5% of physicians make up 95% of the payouts, and they're the big mistakes. People do make mistakes, but and if you like business, which again I don't, then maybe private practice is something that interests you. My husband loves it, and he's in private practice, and he loves thinking about, he tries to talk to me, and we realized that wasn't, so he talks to his friends about it, but he talks about the bottom line and ratios and expense stuff. And that's when my eyes glaze over. I'm like, okay, that sounds really cool. I just like to go to work and just think about the patients every day because I don't like numbers. But that can really get you down if you don't pick the right job for you. Like, say, if I went into private practice, solo practice as an OBGYN, and I had to make all those decisions, I would hate it because I just want to practice medicine. This is the part where I'm going to talk about mental health stuff. So if this is not something you want to hear about, come back in 5 minutes. I think it's really important that you understand that when you're going into medicine, that a lot of what we do is not normal. It is not normal to have to deal with a lot of the things that we do. In obstetrics, the hardest things for me, I'm in obstetrics, right? People are young and happy. We're having babies. It's always wonderful and it's happy. And that's not the case. We have infertility, we have miscarriage, we have the patients who come to the hospital to have a baby and they leave without a baby. Or even worse yet, maternal deaths, which is one of the hardest things that I've experienced as a physician, of course, in 2020, because that's what 2020 is. And it's hard to, it's just stuff that you're not, as a human, right? Maybe you lose a family member or something like that and you move on, but to always have this, these potential things. And I think the hardest thing for me in obstetrics is having that bad outcome where you tell that patient who came in, her baby's not moving, that the reason her baby's not moving is because her baby has died, and then have to go to the next room and be happy and joyous because you have to do a delivery and you can't bring that over there and you can't, that's not normal. And as a human person, like you give a part of your mental health to that. So in my residency, and most residencies as interns, you're pretty protected, really, because you're really stupid and you don't know anything and you could kill a lot of people. So your upper level residents, they care, there's lots of layers of protection, appropriately so, which also means that you're given the easy stuff. So in OBGYN, it means that you get to do all the happy stuff. And then in your second year, they're like, here we go. So you're doing all the cancer cases, you're doing all the preterm births, you're doing all the demise deliveries, you're doing all the bad stuff. And so for me, second hard year has been same time as resident doing all the stuff in the child abuse cases, and he's seen all the bad stuff, the trauma, and dealing with the kids with cancer, which I don't know how anybody does that. And just, that was a really dark time. And thankfully, I feel like residencies especially are becoming more aware of this and they're offering support. I think it's very different than, say, 20, 30 years ago, where it was like, just deal with it. This is what it is, just deal with it. I feel like there's more acceptance. And so we had like our own department therapist who took care of all of us when we needed that. And to talk about suicide, so suicide rates are ridiculously high for physicians. And what I think is really, really sad. So in all groups across the board, there's suicide attempts and suicide completion, and the men always succeed more at completion of suicide, except for female physicians. And because we're sick and twisted, we joke, we're so good at getting, like, we are a group of people, like when we do it, we do it. And not to be crass, but there is a reason that in our field, men are 1.5 more times likely to commit suicide and females 2.5 more times. And it's like the only group of people where females outnumber the men. So 300 physicians die every year from suicide. And just 2 days ago, we had somebody commit suicide where I worked. And I don't know the details, but it happens. And now even more so, especially right now when we're dealing with a pandemic, especially when our leaders say that we are doing this to make money. And it can just be very, very demoralizing. But again, you're like, yay, you're supposed to be convincing these kids to go into medicine. I think that if you know going in that what you do is not normal, but looking for programs where there is that support, and we had that support and we were taught how to deal with these things, and you talk about it and you surround yourself with people, then you are able to more functionally deal with it. And I will get to this later. It shouldn't always be easy. If you have this gift of being able to work in a job where you are there for the best moments as well as the worst moments, and you are able to walk people through that and do the best job that you can, it shouldn't always be easy. And it can also, death can be really beautiful when done really well, and when you feel that everybody's wishes were respected, and you feel like you were a part of helping people through that. Like there's nothing, I mean, that's a gift. And you can't get that from every job. So I just think it's important to know. And when you look at burnout and you look at interns, like statistics, like 23% of interns have contemplated suicide, and burnout's super high. There's no quick fix. There's no 1 hour stupid retreat that they're going to have you do, or they buy donuts for the department. It's about protecting yourself and saying no and keeping whatever you can for you. So for me in residency, it was hiking. It was having friends who were in medicine, because for me, I wanted to be able to talk about these things. For other people, it's about making friends outside of medicine, or not marrying a spouse in medicine because you want to have that wall. But for me, I like that. I liked being able to just deal with that. For me, it was reading. And now for me, it's my book club and exercise. So you have to keep parts of yourself that are not touched by that. So, and then let's keep the depressed talk going. So delayed gratification, I think I would not be an OBGYN if I did not talk about impact of fertility on medicine. So the rate of infertility in the general population for females is 1 in 8. Female physicians, that rate is double. So 1 in 4 female physicians will experience infertility. And it's not just because they're older when they decide to have childbearing. It's probably related to other things like disrupted sleep, night shift working, increased cortisol levels due to stress, and who knows what else. That doesn't mean you cannot have kids and be successful, or that you can't decide to have kids in residency, or that you that will be stuck. But I think it's important that when you're going down this path, that you think about, potentially talking with your physician about your plans. Now we've got great things like egg freezing, which was experimental technology when I was in residency, and now is offered. So not to rain on anybody's parade, but I think the best thing you can do for fertility and protecting your own fertility is to know what the stats are and the data is, so that you can be proactive about whatever it is you want. And I'm not saying you have to see a reproductive endocrinologist, but just knowing this information empowers you. That's all the depressing stuff I have. And so, yeah, medicine's a really hard path. I would be lying to you if I told you that it was rainbows and kittens every day, and I love going to work and everything's always perfect. But, I think knowing that stuff, you can be like, you know what, I hear that and I still want to do it. And that's awesome. And if not, that's okay too. But there are amazing things about really being a doctor. And the first one is the financial security. So I kind of hinted at this. Yes, you will have delayed gratification and delayed compensation, but you will, once you are done and you graduate, and once you're board certified, like the world is yours. And even in the midst of a pandemic, even in the midst of pandemic pay cuts, you can always find a job. You will always know that your job will be secure. Even if it might not be the perfect job for you, you can always find something. So for me, we took pay cuts, and I knew that if I had to, I could get a temp job where I fly once a week to like Montana and do a week's worth of shifts and come back, or whatever. There's always that financial security. And I can't think of, I don't know, there's very few other jobs where you know that you're always going to have a job, and it may not be perfect, but you'll always be able to pay the bills. You'll always be able to pay your loans back, which is why I don't let my loans stress me out, because I know whatever, like they'll get paid back. I think the second great thing about medicine is flexibility. So I love that in medicine, once you've done your training and you're board certified in whatever field, there's so much flexibility. There's direct clinical medicine. Now there's telemedicine. You can work full-time. You can work part-time. You can do medical writing, like a lot of the stuff that I do. You can do consulting. You can do research. You can have a family. You can figure out what works for you. I worked part-time right out of residency, and then or full-time, and then I decided to go part-time, and I would never go back to full-time. Oh my God. Like I just would never do that again. It was insane. And I love that I have the balance. I have the time to do stuff like this. I have the time to do all the other things. And that's like my fun creative outlet, so that when I am like this weekend, I work Friday, Saturday night, I work 12-hour shifts overnight, and I will not get to sleep tomorrow during the day. So I'll be up for 24 hours, but I don't care, because I know that then I'll be off for a couple days, and I get to see my friends at work, and I've had my cup filled doing other things this week. So it's not like I'm working 80 hours straight, which yes, I did in residency, and that was bananas, but it was time limited. So I love having that flexibility. And when I decided that we were going to have, a second kid, and I had my first in residency, my second as an attending, I was able to be the boss of my schedule and say, here's when I'm working. And it's just nice to know that I put in all that time, and all of my 20s to my training and to medical school. But then now in my 30s, I'm able to say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to do. So being able to kind of be your own boss is really nice, especially in crazy times like this. The third thing that's really awesome about medicine, and you're probably like, why are you waiting till now to mention it? But it's whatever. Is like saving lives is really cool. Like it's really cool that you get to go to work every day and be that person, and like you get the adrenaline rush. And yeah, I don't know a way to explain it. And for obstetrics, it's, you know, the difference between 10 minutes between where a baby's going to make it and a baby's not going to make it, or a woman seizing or having a postpartum hemorrhage, and or, you know, being able to do a C-section in under 2 minutes. I don't know. It's just pretty badass that you get to go to work and you get to do these things, and other people have to spend their time volunteering, and like, you're like, that's what I do every day. You know, I get to do this cool stuff, and I get to go to work. And for me in women's health, it's knowing that let's say there's a patient who came in and who was abused. And because of me, she was able to get through her first GYN office and not feel traumatized. Or she was able to be successful with breastfeeding because I interacted with her, or things like that. I mean, it's just, again, the training sucks. The hard days suck. The dying sucks. All of that sucks. But when you can think of those times where you've literally saved a life or two in a day, like there's not many other jobs where you get to do that. So I think that really is the payoff. So yeah, so it's kind of, you know, it's pretty cool. The next one is that your degree goes places. So I talked about the flexibility and the other things you can do, like consulting, other than direct medical care, or even doing direct medical care. And for example, like I'm the medical director of a clinic, and I sit on a few national boards. But your degrees also get you in the door in other ways. So there is I'm not saying anything on TikTok that nobody else hasn't said or could say or whatever, but the reason that I'm being contacted by news agencies is because I have an MD after my name. And so having that degree gives you a degree of legitimacy, and it opens up doors. And whether or not that's right, you know, I could agree with you all day long that, you know, for example, nurses doing certain things, or PAs, I mean, they're just as awesome. But having that degree, it just opens up doors and it helps you make connections. And let's say you want to start up a business and get funding or things like that, it just opens up a lot of doors. Again, it feels, you know, I don't feel mad about it, because again, when I missed how many Christmases and worked 80 something hours straight in residency, like I feel like that's okay. I should be able to, there should be some benefit here. So that is a good aspect. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'd love to hear your questions, would be the amazing relationships. And, you know, I had amazing friendships and wonderful relationships in college that I'm still close to people, but there is no relationship like the people you went through medical training with, the people that you were up at 3 o'clock in the morning when the shit hit the fan. And after, you know, you deal with it, you're like, did that just happen? You know, I went through a bunch of pictures from residency in preparation for this talk today, and then I realized that it was going to be on Facebook and recorded, and I probably shouldn't put those pictures out there. But I mean, we had so much fun. And even in the hardest times in my residency program, I mean, we had an annual roast where throughout the entire year, you collected all the bad, like you made fun of everybody and you submitted it to this committee, and then you had this big show, and we roasted everybody, and we gave out awards for Samurai Surgeon and Born to be Chief, which is the intern who acted a little too big for their britches. I won that award my intern year. And just the most embarrassing stories, but that's the stuff that like gets you through those traumatic times, the ability to laugh at yourself. I mean, there's just nothing like when you, like you said, you're spending Christmas Eve, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you decide you're going to make waffle sundaes because you want to be happy. And so you go down to the cafeteria and you talk the chef into giving you ice cream. And like, there's just so many fun memories. And these are people that to this day, you know, in my residency class, they've gone on to be infertility doctors and cancer doctors and high-risk OB doctors and family planning. And those are the people that when I'm at work at 11 o'clock at night and I have a question, I text them and we help each other out. And we will always be there for each other. And, you know, we buy our kids gifts. And there's just some crazy relationships that when you go through saving lives and doing these things that, you know, it's kind of like a sorority on steroids. And also you have to stay close to these people because they've got so much dirt on you, they can just ruin you. So the pictures they have, the stories they have, but it's super fun. And so that's what gets you through the hard stuff and the feeling like, why am I doing this? Why this person's just yelling at me when you're an intern, you can never do anything right and whatever. And I don't know. It's an amazing path. It's one of those things that if you like, I go to work every day and I love my job, and I'm so thankful for what I do. And I'm not saying that I don't get annoyed or that I'm not tired. I mean, that would be abnormal. I'm human, but if you ask me, like, if there's anything else you could do, like, I don't have an answer for you, because this is the only thing that I would want to do, and be truly happy. So I think it's a wonderful field, and I think that it's hard to get into, and I think that's for a reason. I think you really, you want to make sure that you want to do it, but the payoff is huge. So hopefully I ended on a good note there after all my depressing points. But so yeah, that's what it's really like. But I would love to answer your direct questions if you have like nitty-gritty questions about what it's really like or anything at all. I'm happy to answer anything you got. And I don't know if you've got any, Phil or Libby. I don't see anything in the chat here. Samantha, I do like your bug. It's a little disturbing, that bug icon, but that ant, but
I'm also checking Facebook. Sorry.
And can you tell us what a hospitalist is? I can guess ish, but I really don't know. I'm not familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. So the hospitalist model of practice in OBGYN is newer. So it's more established in internal medicine and pediatrics. So they're doctors who just work in the hospital, and they were born out of, the old fashioned that your private practice doctor saw you in clinic and then also would see you in the hospital and would still see their clinic. But as panels got bigger and as medicine got more complicated, it's just not possible for them to be able to do both and to be able to stay up to date in hospital medicine as well as outpatient medicine. So solely based in the hospital. And as OBGYNs, we are newer in this. Maybe in the past 10 years, we've been doing more hospitalist medicine. So I'm just based in the hospital. So I don't have any clinic. So the definition of an OBGYN hospitalist is one who cares for hospitalized women. So for me, I'm just doing obstetrics right now. I don't do any more GYN, but you could be an OBGYN hospitalist and do both. But so what it means is that I have a more predictable schedule. So I know I work 12 hours. I don't work clinic and have to stay late, which is great. I did not love that. That was super hard as a parent. But the downside of it is that I lose those long-term connections that I have with my patients, and I do more acute stuff and more high-risk stuff, which is hard, but actually I like. So
is that the same as like a laborist?
It's funny you should ask. So so a laborist is, yes and no. It's basically the same thing. So a laborist might be somebody who just does labor, whereas OBGYN hospitalists, we also care for postpartum, patients in the emergency room, that kind of thing. There was a paper that was written like 6 years ago that tried to define it, and yeah, that's basically the same. So yeah. Oh, here's a question. Yay. Was there any other specialty in the medical field you considered before OBGYN? Yes and no. I mean, when I did my rotations, I liked parts of all of them. And I liked surgery, but I didn't just want to do appendectomies and gallbladders all day. And then I liked emergency medicine, but I knew I would get burnt out if I just did emergency medicine. And then once I did my OBGYN rotation, I loved it because I loved the variety, the ability to do clinic and operate and focus on women's healthcare. And I like the political advocacy that came with that. I also like that most of my patients were young and healthy and not too complicated with a problem list that was 90 pages long, but that feels like that has changed. That feels like that has changed. So yeah. Ooh, what does the media get wrong about me? Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've got one that came in privately, and there's one on Facebook. But here's one. How were you able to balance your job and starting a family?
Yeah, great question. I did not do it well with my first, I will tell you that, because I had my first when I was a chief resident, so that was my last year of residency. I had him in December, and that was one of the pictures I was going to show you. Like, I was a good OB resident. I worked up until my day. And when I came in labor, I was sure to sign into the computer and sign out all my charts before, like, I got my epidural, because I had to be, I didn't want to impact anybody. And I only took 6 weeks off, but I had to make up 2 of those weeks at the end of my residency. And I got really bitter when I went back to work because I was really upset that I was separated from my baby. I had to go back so soon. Patients would come into clinic late, which means that I would miss feeding my kid. Doing 24-hour calls was really hard when you don't see your baby for 24 hours. And I was breastfeeding and pumping, and most people were supportive, some were not. And so I got really bitter at the end of my chief year. And plus your chief year, you think it's supposed to be easy when you finish, but it's not, because all the stuff rolls uphill. And so I don't think I did a great job with that, but I also think that, you do the best with what you can. And quite frankly, it was the perfect time for us. There's no perfect time to have kids. It's just the time that you decide is right for you. But the thing I did do right was I took 3 months off after residency before I started my real grown-up job. And those were like the happiest 3 months of my life. And I feel like I made up some of what I missed, and then I was less bitter. And then after working full-time for a bit, I realized I wanted to be around my kid more, and I missed him. And that's when I decided to go part-time. And I felt guilty for a long time being part-time. I felt that my partners looked down on me, and a lot of them, they were older men who said, how can you be part-time so soon? You're so young, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, just because I work half-time doesn't mean I have half the knowledge, and I don't feel guilty about it anymore. And then with my second, I was an attending. And so I was able to better prepare. I took 3 months off afterwards. And then I was part-time when I went back, and he weighed a whole pound more because I think I was less stressed out that pregnancy. So when he was born. So I think that I did the best that I could, but you figure out what time is right for you when you go for it. So luckily I was at a program where they were supportive. There are some places where I've heard where the resident goes in and says they're pregnant, and the program director curses and gets very upset. But also in the field of obstetrics, I feel like you can't be that annoyed when your residents get pregnant. Like, that's all we do. Yeah, it wasn't super easy, but made it work. So.
And let me give you this one from Facebook, and then I know you have at least one waiting, and now I have another one waiting. So we're getting lots of questions, which is great. This is a two-parter, and this is pretty involved. How do you preserve women's autonomy during the birthing process and make sure you are listening to her birth plan and her wants while still keeping her safe? Also, how do you help a woman through the process of a stillbirth?
Oh, those are such good questions. I love it. Oh man, you guys are so much smarter than I was. So I am huge about, I think birth trauma is very real, and I think it's getting more play and more the attention it deserves now, because I think for far too long, women have been treated not the way that they should have in labor. And so I think that there is a way to keep a woman safe in pregnancy and delivery, and also do it in a respectful way. So that's why I love being an OB hospitalist. Even though I might only meet these people 10 minutes when they come in and their baby's born 2 hours later, I feel like I'm very easily able to form a relationship and make a connection with people in a kind of a quick way. And I enjoy that. Not everybody does. So I think there's the ability to give choice. There's the ability to present options. And I'm very honest with my patients when I'm like, you know what, you could do this or this. Either one's totally fine with me. What's best for you? What feels right for you, versus the, your baby's not doing well, and I'm really concerned right now. And if you do not want to have a C-section, again, I can't force you to do anything, but I'm going to tell you, this is not going to end well. And so there's a way to communicate and not force people and coerce people, and respect their autonomy, and understand that at the end of the day, it's their choice and not mine. I used to get really angry at people when they would choose to have a home birth, for example, and then come in when I was a resident, hemorrhaging and blood dripping on the floor. And I was like, well, why did you make this dumb choice? You knew that you were a terrible candidate for a home birth. You had 2 C-sections, like, come on. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm going home in 12 hours at the end of the day. Like, I can't, people make choices, and I can't, always say that I would have made that choice, but here's where we are now, and let's move forward. So I think it's important to build trust and to not try to coerce people into things because they're convenient for you. And the second thing about how to help a woman with a stillbirth, I still worry every time that I do it. I could have done it better, because I think that, you worry when you cry with a patient, like, oh, should I have not cried? You worry when you don't cry with a patient because you're like, oh, does she think I'm, I think I'm very honest, and I tell patients, I say, there's nothing I can say to make this better, and there's no right or wrong way to act, but I'm here for you and we're going to get through this together, but this is the worst day of your life. And I'm happy that I'm here to help you through that day. And I'm going to do the best I can, but if something's not right, tell me. And I just try to be there, and everybody's different. So I try to normalize how there's no wrong choices when it comes to managing things. And honestly, it's always the dads I feel worse for, because I feel like they fall apart because they are mourning the loss of their child, and they're also trying to protect their partner, and it's really hard for them. So yeah, I think the first time I had to deal with that, I was petrified. I didn't know what to do. And I remember my chief resident, I was like, I don't know what to say. What am I going to? She's like, Jen, just be human. Just be human. That's all it requires here. Like, okay. And that was the best advice she could give. So it's hard. It's really hard. Good questions. Really good questions though. There's a question here. What does the media get wrong about being a doctor? Oh, honey, pull up a chair. We don't make more money off of COVID, in case you heard about that one. FYI. It's not a hoax. I think I'm a little bitter. I am. I think the thing that they get wrong is just the idea that like we're just out for money, right? Because I'm still waiting for that Porsche to show up for all the vaccines and the birth control, because that's not how it works. I think a lot of it's that we're all in the drug companies' pockets, and sure, some are, absolutely, but the great majority are not. I think that's the big thing, or the thing that, like, you know, we just, especially in the field of obstetrics, that we just do C-sections on everybody at 4 o'clock because we want to go home or we want to get to the golf course. And again, as a hospitalist, I have nowhere to go. That's one thing I do tell my patients to help with their rapport, is that I'm like, I'm here, whether or not we do this vaginally or C-section, like, you know, I think that's a big thing. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely bad doctors out there, or just people who don't know how to communicate, right? We've all had that doctor where we're like, what? You're like a robot. Like, why did you choose this field? But the majority, you know, we take these things home with us. We think about it. We wake up in the middle of the night and we're like, oh, did I do this? You know, we're not in any drug company's pocket. Again, if I was, you know, I'd have a nicer car. So, there's another question here too. When were you 100% sure you wanted to become a doctor, and did you have doubts? I'll start with that one. You know, I was one of those kids where I walked around and I said I wanted to be a doctor. I think my parents just spoon-fed that to me because they wanted to make sure that I had a good job, because they were teen parents and they didn't want me to, you know, screw up like they thought they had screwed up. And I internalized that. And then I actually did want to be a doctor once I learned what it was. But I did have doubts in high school. I mentioned this the last one, where I did like a shadowing thing, and I shadowed these Harvard medical students, and they were so miserable. And so when I started college, I was like, no, I'm just going to major in science and do something else, because it sounds terrible, you know. But then I realized that wasn't true. And I'm glad I did not let them sway me. They were just some unhappy people. So in any of this, I think if anybody tells you medicine is perfect or medicine is horrible, both of them are wrong, and find somebody who's more middle of the road, who's going to tell you the negatives and the benefits, because it's somewhere in the middle. It's not terrible. Usually it's the burnt out doctors who are telling you that, and the ones that are like, it's phenomenal. They're doing like cosmetic procedures and just making cash, and, you know, they're on like Bravo or something like that. And a specific case or event took a toll and you feel like you couldn't do it anymore. You know, so again, that second year of residency, the first time that I had to deliver babies that I knew weren't going to make it, that was super hard. And also I felt like I wanted to walk away because I was in residency. And so it felt endless at the time. You know, you're working insane hours. It's not like you have time off to regroup as much as maybe I should have. But I will tell you, that changes. So when we had a really sad outcome earlier this year, as much as it broke my heart, I also felt proud, because I knew that we did everything we could and we did the best, and I had the best team, and there was nothing I would have done differently. And I was so proud of how everybody stepped up and stayed late. And so even though that was a heartbreaking case, I was able to then see kind of the beauty in some of it. So I think as my career has matured, my response has matured a little bit. Not to say that it's not still hard. So I have to say, and even now, like with COVID, and I am so sick of all these new protocols. Like I joke with the patients, they're like, can we have a visitor? I was like, well, in this 10-minute span you can, but it may change in the next 10 minutes. And I may come in here in a trash bag because we may have run out of things. And, you know, and I'm just doing the best I can here. And I mean, that it's taking a toll on the chronicity. That's hard. but at the same time, you know, you're just like, it's fine. Everything's fine. We just show up. And I think trying to have the long view that, you know, we're all doing the best we can. You know what, somebody said, what does the media get wrong? Or, you know, what's hard? Maybe I should touch on this. It's really hard when you see people actively ignoring science and you every day are doing your damnedest at work. I think that when I see people, like my kids know, they're like, here goes mom. Like when I see somebody without a mask, or I'm like, put your mask up, you know, and they're like, oh, it doesn't work. And I was like, don't get me started. Okay. You know, because we're putting ourselves out there, we're exposing our families and whatnot. And I think maybe this will be one of the hardest things, is just seeing people act so laissez-faire about it. It's really insulting, but I also think the majority of people are smart, but those few. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now before I get myself in trouble.
I have a couple. One, how do you know if you have what it takes mentally to complete the schooling for this career path?
Yeah. You know, I mean, that's a great question. Can I tell you honestly, medical school is like not that hard. Like it's a lot of information volume wise, but like if you can memorize the stuff that you're memorizing right now in terms of organic chemistry and physics, like you can do it. It's just a matter of volume. And so I think that the best way to do it is to have as vigorous of a schedule that you can in college. And if you can succeed at that, then you are prepared for medical school. I will tell you, there were times where I took classes in medical school and they were easier than some of the classes I took at Washington College, because I had prepared a lot. I knew a lot of the stuff from my biology classes and my chemistry classes, and it's just the amount of memorization. So try and push yourself in college and work really hard. Yeah, I think that it's more about can get in and shadow somebody and see what it's like, just see what a day is like, to understand or to be able to see what a full day in clinic looks like. That I think is the harder part, and you can't really know it unless you do it. But in terms of what we learn in medical school, it's not that hard. I actually didn't go, luckily I went to a medical school where you didn't have to go to class to be in person. You did have to learn the material, but they knew that some people learn in lecture, others learn by reading the books. And so after the first couple of months, my first year, I realized I did better on my own. And so I joked that like my medical school was in Starbucks, and I would just get up and I'd read the textbooks and I'd outline them and I'd teach them to myself. And there was some stuff you had to go because it was super confusing, or you had, you know, group things. But for the memorization stuff, like if you can memorize all those fish in that textbook that Dr. Connaughton makes you memorize, like you can memorize the names of some drugs. You know, it's not that hard, but not as fun, but.
I have one, it's a few parts actually, and it's back to OB. Would you say you're more on the conservative or aggressive side with your treatments? There's a few in here. Do you feel that male OBs are discouraged in joining the field because they themselves don't have the anatomy? And I like the last one of this question. There's another one that I think you already covered. And then the last one is, do you watch Grey's Anatomy, or is it cringy for you?
I don't watch Grey's Anatomy, because when I watched them in the OR and it was silent and things weren't on, I was like, no, I can't watch this. Watch Scrubs. That's what it's like. Yeah, that's totally what it is like at 3:00 in the morning when you're losing your mind. And yeah, so no, I don't watch Grey's. And the one males being discouraged, I don't think they're discouraged, if anything. So I trained where I trained, we had a bunch of guys, and I had guys in my residency class. Again, part of the pictures I had were of them dressed up as women, which were hilarious. No, if anything, I feel like sometimes I wonder if in obstetrics it's a little easier to get in because that male aspect, programs want diverse populations, as they should. And I think males make amazing OBGYNs because they offer a different perspective. And some people are like, why would you want to be an OBGYN? You don't need to have cancer to be a good cancer doctor. You don't need to have a vagina to be a vagina doctor. It's, you know, so I think that they can absolutely get good training. And the first one about conservative or aggressive, I'm aggressive when I should be, and I'm conservative when I should be. I really believe in evidence-based medicine. And I also trained in the Pacific Northwest, which I think we practice. I think we tend to be a little more conservative and hippy dippy. But also I'm the first one to tell you, I was like, you need a C-section. And if you want to hemorrhage and die, we can do that. But I really feel like we should go to the OR right now. But I'm also the one who can say, like, I don't care if she wants to labor standing up and delivering the whatever. Like, it's no skin off my back. I think it's about being appropriately aggressive when you should be, so that way patients believe you when you are, and having the evidence to back it up. And I am no stranger to being, you know, I work in a very collaborative group with nurse midwives and nurses and other physicians, and we all work together. And I have no, what's it called? Modesty. I will say, I need some help, or I'm not quite sure, or I don't feel like can you help me explain this to her? You know, we all work very well together. But no, there's never a need to shout or be mean. So never confuse that with being aggressive. Even in the craziest of emergencies, you can get down to somebody's face and in a very calm voice, in 10 seconds, explain what's happening. I believe that in obstetrics, especially, we need to explain things better, especially to women, so they can have some choice. Good question.
I like this one too, and I think this touches on some of the negatives you mentioned earlier. What are some of the things that you did or currently do to preserve your mental health from your residency experience, then on to the present day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in residency, we had like a counselor that we could go talk to. And I loved how she set it up, because she made it super anonymous, so nobody ever knew. And then afterwards, we all found out we were all talking to her and whatever. And so when we had a loss or a hard case, I'd go and I talked to her about it. And there's no shame about that. The other things too, like for me, it was talking to my husband. It was having somebody who I could talk through things, and that was helpful for me. And then it was just getting out and hiking and doing things like that. And currently now for me, it's good coffee. It's a lot of good coffee. And it's working. I think working part-time is really important, because there will be stretches where I'll work 3 or 4 days in a row, and I can feel by that last shift, like my empathy meter we're bottoming out, and, and I'm just like, oh gosh, you start to feel crispy and burnt. And so I know for me that structuring my schedule so that I do have that time to recharge is really important. Yeah, and then good Netflix shows. Emily in Paris is my current favorite, so not feeling guilty about that. There's some questions here on the side. Maybe I should answer those. What advice do you have finding a balance? There's no such thing as balance. There's just every day is a different juggling act, and you decide which balls you're going to let drop and which ones you don't. Like today, I ignored my kids the whole day, and it was so great. I stayed in the basement. I got my work done. So what? They watch TV. Tomorrow I'll be a better parent, but today I needed that time to catch up on all the other stuff that it's my day off, but you guys know you're doing all this stuff in your day off. So it's just about figuring out, like, today, this is my priority, and not feeling guilty, because you can't do it. And it has nothing to do with being in medicine. That's just a life lesson. I love saying no. That's my favorite thing. I love to say no so that I can say yes to the stuff that matters to me. So I think that's really important. So you might say today, you know what, I am going to get up early because I do want to exercise. I'm going to say no to that extra hour of sleep, but I get to exercise for an hour. So it's just figure what works for you. And then advice you would give yourself as a freshman in undergrad. Oh, that's a good, have fun. But I think, don't waste your time. Like, don't be on the 10-year plan in college. Like, try different things, but at the same time, I mean, from the very beginning, you can be starting to get experience and deciding, seeing what things work for you, seeing if this is something you want to do. Don't squander time, but also be sure to have fun and realize that, there's so many good things you can get involved in. Being matched for a residency, does the prestige or respect of the medical school you attend matter? Maybe, I don't know. That's a good question. Really what matters is you, your letters of recommendation, because they'll be able to see right through the BS. So your letter that your program director or your medical school dean writes, your scores in your classes, that really matters more than, I think, the name of your medical school. I mean, maybe name helps a little bit, but truly it's what you do. It's what you do, how you do it. Let's see. Do you remember your first, like, oh my God, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. So Dr. Kanan, what he's referring to here is that when I was at Washington College, I'm, very much a New York girl, Long Island. Hiking was not my thing. This whole outdoors thing, like, it's been a life transformation. So yeah, so he's probably making fun of me now that I'm in the Pacific Northwest. You know, I'm like, I'm just gonna get out and hike and just go find myself. Like, yeah, that's what happens when you get older. You're like, now I have 2 pairs of hiking boots. I got the whole. I know, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, just do a residency, and you're like, break. I gotta get away from people, and then you go hike, and that's that's how you find that nature is where it's at. I know my parents still in New York. They come out here and they're like, oh my God, like what is all this? So many mountains. And I'm like, Mom, it's a hill. It's not a mountain. So yeah, it's a whole new world. The moral of this story is keep an open mind. You never know where you may end up. Now I'm the one yelling at my kids. They're like, but it's raining. We don't want to go outside. I was like, you're in Portland. This is what we do. Oh, yeah. That's the best question. Do you have any others there, Phil, that you can see here? Oh, here. How does matching for a residency work? Think of it like speed dating for your career. So what it is you're like, yay, I'm going to be an OBGYN. And so you decide to apply to residencies, and then you apply and you interview and you do the whole thing. And then you make a rank list. So you're like, number 1, I want to go here, down to whatever. You can do as many as you want, or, number 20, I'll go here. And then this program interviews 50 people, and they rank everybody from the person they absolutely want down to the last person. And you don't put any programs on your rank list that you wouldn't want to go to, because you could get matched there. So you decide, is it better to not match versus matching at a place you don't want to be? And that's a whole separate talk. And then this magical computer does this thing, and I don't really know how it works, like gerbils that run around. I think before computers, it was actually like all these old ladies in a gym, and they had like cards, and I just would love to be a fly on that wall. Because they're probably like, oh, I don't like that one. But anyways, now it's a computer, it's very ethical. And then it's supposed to go, if there's ties, in the favor of the applicant, and then, it matches you up. So then match day is a big day. It's in March, and, it's a big party. And so of course I was in New Orleans. It involved, the night before we had a blessing from a voodoo priestess. Again, not normal, but that's what happens when you go to medical school in New Orleans. And it panned out because I got my number 1 choice, and my husband did too. And we couples matched, which is even more confusing. You can go into it saying, I will only go somewhere where they also take my partner, which means you better find somebody smarter than you, or, that's just a bummer. And don't go marry somebody who wants to be a neurosurgeon, because that's very competitive. And so we were lucky. We both got our number 1 places. And you open up your envelope and they call your name, and then you go out and you celebrate that night, or you cry, you just celebrate it the same way. So it's very stressful, but it was also a really fun process we were couples matching. So when you do that, you've got to apply to even more places, because you need to get your statistics up. And so we were all over the place, and we met, you meet people along the trail, and you get to know each other. And it was super fun, but I'm glad it's done. And I like it because it worked out, but yeah, it's a whole dance.
So I think we're just about at 8 o'clock out here, or 5 o'clock for you.
5 o'clock somewhere.
So unless you have any pressing questions sitting in front of you, I think we can probably wrap this up.
No, I don't have any other questions. I hope that this was a good balance of, medicine can be really hard, but it can be really awesome. And if you go into it for the right reasons, the hard stuff you can deal with. If you don't, I think the hard stuff can break you. And even if you do, just know that it is never shameful to ask for help or say that you're struggling. I don't want to make you guys sound like, oh, I found this perfect job and now I'm happy all the time. I mean, we have our low moments, and I have colleagues that I can talk with and trust. And the reason I think I am so happy is because I'm in a job where I do feel supported. And so if you think it's something for you, just know that there's pluses and minuses, just like any job, but it's totally a kick-ass career. So we would love to have you in the ranks if you want to do it. And if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to shoot me an email or whatever. I'm always around. So
thank you so much for all your time and the lecture series. It's been absolutely fabulous. So we've had students talking about it on all my Zooms. So that's been like class Zoom. So it's been wonderful.
Oh, thanks. No, I mean, and it's just so fun to see you guys and to see faces from, You're muted, so I'm glad I can't hear you. So
just saying, it's a pretty old face. It's a pretty old face. This isn't blonde, all right?
hey, you still had, so it's, you know,
right,
you're good.
right, it's there.
No, but it's great. And I think it's great that you guys are hosting all these series, because I think I would have loved to have had access to this kind of stuff. So take advantage, and just more Zoom fun, but it's totally worth it. So thank you guys so much for having me. It's been so fun. So,
Thank you so much.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Y'all have a good one. My awkward way.
Bye.
Bye.
Jazz hands. Bye.
Jazz hands.
Clap. Bye.
My brother is deaf. So I always do that. Okay.